What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Mortal Shell 2 via its public open beta that is ongoing right now. And to that end, if you want to check out any of this for yourself, you can just go to the game's Steam page and download said beta. And this particular bit of content was kind of dropped along the weekend there with all of the recent game shows and everything, and it took me a little while to get around to it, but I knew I wanted to cover it, primarily because people have been asking me to take a look at the first Mortal Shell for quite some time. So when I got word that they were doing a standalone sequel, my interest was naturally piqued. But with that in mind, if you want comparisons to the first game, I'm not really your guy for that, though they do pretty well stress that you don't need any prior experience to jump into this one because it is, again, a standalone sequel. So let's talk a little bit about that open beta. The open beta covers the prologue as well as a good chunk of the beginning of the game, including the world's sort of compact open world that they're calling it, alongside showcasing, of course, the major features. And while some progress will carry over from this beta into the full game, not all of it will. They made that pretty clear. But participants also unlock some extra stuff when the full game rolls around, but we don't know when the full game is set to release. It's only got a 2026 release date. It feels like they probably haven't locked that down just yet. And given the timing, I would imagine Gamescom upcoming in August would likely be the most likely place we would see a release date for it. Nonetheless, as an open beta, they're obviously soliciting feedback, and I kind of want to start the video with some of mine. Overall, I would say this was a fun experience, and we're going to get into specifics. If anything, I would call this a Souls-Light, which we have seen every here and there. I've played a couple games that I think would fall under that label, and I call them that because they have the Souls-like mechanics, yes. However, like one thing or the other is kind of toning that experience down a little bit. Like, for instance, we don't have a stamina bar here. You can just do your combos and whatnot. And I would also say that as it stands currently, the difficulty is a little on the low side. Some of that is something else we're about to get into. But to be honest, the only boss that was even much of a challenge here was the last boss of this beta. And that is only because that character has this charge attack that is very hard to get out of the way of. And to that end, this really does lean more on the action side of this type of game if they have no plans to adjust that. I don't know, we'll see what happens with the full release, obviously. But I do actually think that right now it's probably a little easier than would be intended, and that is my other bit of feedback. Some of these bosses need work because they are a little easily cheesed. The first boss you run into, the Tar Golem, I had a situation where it kind of got like stuck slightly above the actual ground level, and this caused most of its attacks to just not connect. And then I actually had a different but similar encounter with a boss later that unfortunately I didn't realize I had not recorded, but it has a staff attack, and something I noticed pretty quickly was that that staff attack is at an angle, and if you are just attacking it in melee and don't bother to move away when it telegraphs that attack, it completely misses you. You can just stand there attacking and it will in no way hit you at all, and that boss was super easy as a result. And so that's the kind of thing I think they're really going to have to pay attention to and fix up before the actual release of this game, because otherwise it's a pretty fun experience. And so let's talk about the rest of it. But what is this game actually about? Well, Mortal Shell 2 puts us in the role of the Harbinger. The Harbinger is one of the children from a being known as the Undermether. The Undermether crash landed into the planet, and its bones were turned into things like temples, with a bunch of eggs or ova being stored in like a special chamber there. Over time, this was good. Everybody seemed to worship this thing, apparently, and then it turns out some being or another was corrupting the Undermether the entire time, or at least attempting to, as it mostly seems okay otherwise. But this wound up letting madness loose into the world, causing much of the problems we see, but it also corrupted all of the eggs or the ova. There weren't too many left, you happen to be one of them, and as the Harbinger, your job ultimately is going to be to reconnect and purify and find all of these ova and return them, which I'm sure will lead to no unintended consequences and everything will be totally fine. And yet, our powers as the Harbinger see us being able to make use of shells. So our base form, the Harbinger, isn't the strongest all on its own, but lucky for us, we can sort of meld with personalities that have been made for that purpose, known as shells, warriors of the past, that you can connect, bond with, and learn about, and sort of via progression, incorporate into your own being to make the most of them. You start out in the prologue with one named Heros, but he unfortunately doesn't quite make it, and you are then forced to get a new one via the sort of thief guy that you'll see throughout the rest of it, and those are the ones that are available as part of this beta. Now, each individual shell has all sorts of different powers, as you would expect, but you are able to freely equip different types of weapons, which is something I liked. The equipment is not bound to the shell, but rather the abilities you have access to. Each shell has a special power, like Heros can petrify people, and then I think it's Teal, the sort of rogue guy you play as, the rest of it can become a shadow and sort of sneak attack people. And you can actually upgrade shells individually outside of regular character progression to increase their effects even farther and make a shell that you like playing, as an example, even better. But that's kind of the gist of it story-wise. From there, let's talk about some of the progression I saw here. Now, progression was really interesting because it seems decently layered. You will, as always with these types of games, be collecting experience as you kill things. You'll take these back to the beacons, which are your rest points, and then you can spend them at the beacons, the gloom as it's called, to level your harbinger up. Doing this increases a wide variety of base stats, including damage, overall health for all of your shells, etc. You'll also gain shell points, and then you can, at that same page, once you get access to it, increase the level of the shell you have. To take that one step farther, you can also, out and about, find these items called glimpses, and take those back to the main area, Marrow Keep, as it's called, your sort of hub once you get to the open world, and spin those glimpses on an NPC there who will then deepen your bond with that shell, giving you access to more and more abilities to pump up. So far, so good. And then the rest of progression is a mix of other things that are standard to the genre. You'll be finding items that you can then spend at a forge there once you unlock the services of it in order to increase the quality of your weapons. As I mentioned, you can't equip weapons independently of the shells, and you can also do things like improve your number and potency of the healing items you have access to. And then, of course, there's the rest of your gear, like the tar stones, for instance. While the basic gear, that is to say your main weapon and the ranged weapon you have equipped at any given time, are more or less self-explanatory, tar stones are a little more interesting. You can find these out and about, and they come in a few different varieties. They're usually rewards for killing bosses or mini-bosses, that kind of thing. And they can just buff and provide different effects across any shell you happen to be using because you equip them directly to your harbinger. These can be things like increasing your stagger damage or giving you buffs when you perform certain actions, or some of them even take a more active role. They've actually got these subdivided up into different types that activate based on what you are doing. But we're still not done. You actually get an item that can customize your guard as well. So you have a basic guard by default, but you don't necessarily have to use that one. You get a couple options throughout the beta to, say, turn yourself to stone temporarily to reduce incoming damage. You get an item that allows you to focus more succinctly on parrying, though you can parry normally as well. It just kind of adjusts the timing window and effect of it. So not only do you have these shells, which there'll be more of in the full game to help customize, and your weapons and everything, but you can also use all of this stuff to customize exactly how you want to approach the combat on top of all of that. Now, I also mentioned an open world throughout here. So the prologue is pretty linear, but then you get to an area called Marrow Keep, which is going to act as your base of operations. And from Marrow Keep, you'll be able to explore what they are describing as a compact open world, where you can explore, run around, complete objectives, and then also, of course, chase down the main story. Supposedly, the main story is going to be tied to how many of these ova or eggs you wind up collecting, and doing things like activating and then cleansing the beacons, which act as your fast travel points, or even just exploring the game's little mini dungeons are a way to do that. The mini dungeons are pretty much what they sound like. You'll occasionally come up on points of interest that you can then enter, and there's usually like a small challenge inside, be that enemies or a little puzzle, and you can get a wide variety of rewards for doing those. And then what I thought was interesting is there are things more akin to like a legacy dungeon, if you will. So once you get to certain areas, you'll pass through like a gate or something like that, and then you're in a larger, more, let's say, curated area that is a little less open in terms of navigation and follows a more basic progress route up to a boss. But usually the main rewards you get for doing any of that stuff are things you can then go spend on your progression side, hopefully getting stronger all the time if you are doing it right. But then there's combat itself, which you'll have seen a good bit of on the video up to this point, but a couple things I want to mention. A big mechanic in combat here is your resolve bar, that orange bar that you'll have, and you, of course, increase this by usually hitting enemies, or occasionally you can find these little weird strands out in the environment you can hit to gather up more of it as well. You spend resolve on both your shell abilities, the thing that is unique to that shell, on top of using your ranged weapon. Your ranged weapon costs resolve to actually use, though it is pretty devastating when you happen to do so. So because of that, your resolve kind of winds up being this sort of builder-spender resource on top of everything else you happen to be doing. Now, another aspect of combat that I like is that when your shell gets killed, the fight isn't necessarily over. So when your shell loses all of its health, you, as the Harbinger, get knocked out of it, and you're forced to come to and fight for a more proper fight to the death situation, because if your Harbinger dies, then you actually die and can get kicked back to either Tamaro Keep or your last beacon before you resurrect. Now, you can recover from this situation, however. If you deal enough damage to enemies as just the Harbinger, you can revive your shell, though it gets harder to do so each time, and continue on with the fight. Now, the rest of combat is a little more basic than that and doesn't require as much of a description, because we only get really a couple different weapon types here and things are a little limited, but it's much more of your usual assortment of go in, light, heavy, combo attacks, that kind of thing, block, guard, preferably try to parry, or just get away from enemies and not try to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of them, that sort of thing. And minus a stamina bar, it really is more about your ability to manage a bunch of different enemies at once or find ways to separate them out, etc., etc. But barring the bigger issues I had with bosses and a couple of other little things that weren't feeling necessarily great, that hopefully the beta gives them time to iterate on and provide feedback for, such as how the camera works, though that's hardly unique to this game as far as action titles tend to go. But all in all, I was pretty satisfied with this beta. I enjoyed what I saw here. And while we don't know the exact release date for this one, I am now, more so than I was prior, looking forward to jumping into this for myself, as I think it will be a fun experience. But for today, I do think that is pretty much going to wrap it up. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.